Hey Subfuries, in the Elder Scrolls, the world of Nirn is no stranger to magnificent races with fascinating histories. From the Saïsi, the vampiric serpents of Akavir, to the slow, to the cunning beastfolk of Thras, to the magical Lemire of Tempest Island. But today we'll be talking about the dragons, the dove we meet in Skyrim, and more importantly, what exactly are they? Where did they come from? What do they have to do with Akatosh and Alduin? In the games, we know them from their images in the shadowed skies, hideous roaring and endless fire, terrifying beasts that were once as numerous as they are deadly. Not simple, mindless beasts, but a thriving, intelligent culture. Well, that and the fact they get as annoying as cliff races after a while. But when asking where they came from, most people know the simple answer. Then, of course, there are the dragons, Akavir's most deadly and beautiful former native child. The very name Akavir, in fact, means Dragonland. Though old tales also tell us that they may have come from Atmora and arrived in Tamriel somewhere around the year 1000 of the Merethic era. But beyond that, it isn't clear where they came from, who created them, or why they were created. Well, to understand what might be their origins, we must talk a little bit about their nature. In one book, it talks more explicitly about a connection that they share with Akatosh. Dragons, being dragons, embraced their role as god-kings over men. After all, were they not fashioned in Akatosh's image? For dragons, power equals truth. What exactly does being fashioned in Akatosh's image mean? Well, Paarthurnax says an interesting line in-game.
We were made to dominate. The will to power is in our blood.
This will to dominate, I think, is a reference to their connection to Akatosh, the dragon god of time. Now, Akatosh acts benevolently towards men. I mean, he intervened in the Oblivion Crisis in an earlier game and all, but there is some evidence to suggest that this will to dominate is deeply rooted in an insatiable desire for authority. In the monomyth, it reads that Lorkhan outlined a plan to create a soul for the Orberus. Even Akatosh followed him when he told him that he would be king of the new world. So they created the Mundus. Dragons inherited that desire to rule from him, and just as Akatosh ruled over men, so did they. Though this didn't mean that they were tyrannical and evil. We actually have a few sources that talk about what their society was like on Atmora before Ysgramor began the mass migration. One book notes that the dragon priests demanded tribute and set down laws and codes of living that kept peace between dragons and men. It was only later on in Tamriel that this whole relationship with the dragon cult went sour. But it's here that we can speculate about the nature of the relationship that they share with the dragon god of time. We get a few lines in the lore that touch on this. Paarthurnax says, "The dove are the children of Akatosh, thus we are especially attuned to the flow of time." Even Alduin himself proclaims, "I am Alduin, firstborn of Akatosh." This has led a lot of people to think that there is a parental relationship of sorts between Alduin and the dragons or Akatosh, but it's really not as simple as that. In fact, it's Elder Scrolls lore, so it's nearly always more complicated than that. In fact, before I get into it, the whole relationship between Alduin, Akatosh, Akatusk, Akka, and other aspects of Akka is one of those pieces of Elder Scrolls lore that you feel must have been written, edited, and published by crazy people. I mean, it's fascinating and fantastic, but crazy and deserves a whole video of its own. So I'll be simplifying what I say here to make it at least comprehensible in some form for people who may not be familiar with all of this lore. So we may know Akatosh as the dragon god of time, but believe it or not, he's not the original dragon god of time, really. The original Aedra that controlled all of time in Mundus was known simply as Akka, and it's in that name that we can hear where we get the Akka part of Akatosh. Now, like all timelines hopefully do, time in the Elder Scrolls universe moves in a linear fashion from one moment to the next. If the Dragonborn kills someone, then the next moment they are dead. It is simply cause and effect. But the only reason that time moves in this way, from past to present to future, is because the time god wills it to, because they want it to move in that way. So the question becomes, what happens if the time god, Akka, becomes too distracted or distressed that they cannot keep time moving in that direction? This is what we call a dragon break, and you may have heard of the term. It's where time suddenly goes out of control. Different versions of events all happen at the same time, and the time dragon literally breaks. The best description of what a dragon break is comes from an out-of-game text by Michael Kirkbride, but I feel it sums it up pretty well. Every culture on Tamriel remembers the dragon break in some fashion. Several texts survive this timeless period, and all, unsurprisingly, conflict with one another regarding events. Wars are mentioned in some that never happen in another, the sun changes colour depending on the witness, and the gods either walk among the mortals or they don't. When the time god loses control of time, it's as if a dozen alternate realities are all happening at once, and this is where the dragons come in. Now, there have only been a few known instances of dragon breaks throughout Tamrielic history. One you may well be the most familiar with is the time wound in the events of Skyrim, where the ancient Nords used an Elder Scroll to propel Alduin into the future. Now, this isn't clearly a dragon break in the lore, but the dialogue that Paarthurnax uses in the game would suggest it is. Time was shattered here because of what the ancient Nords did to Alduin. If you brought that Elder Scroll back here to the time wound, with the Elder Scroll that was used to break time, you may be able to cast yourself back. I mean, it literally uses the terminology of time breaking, and this is a dragon, a creature attuned to the flow and nature of time telling us this, so it wouldn't be surprising if this counted. But the second known dragon break is actually one of my favourite little stories from Elder Scrolls lore. In the year 361 of the First Era, a theocratic group known as the Elysian Order came to power in Cyrodiil, and a sect within this group were called the Mudokati Selectives, and they believed something called the exclusionary mandate of Mudokite selection. This foremost being that they believe that the supreme spirit Akatosh is of unitary essence, as proven by the monolinearity of time, that the problem that informs all denial of this is the Eldmeri taint, and the purpose of proper life is the expungement of that taint. Remember when I said that all of this felt like it was written by crazy people? Yeah, I'm talking about stuff like this. But essentially, what this meant was that the Mudokati Selectives hated the idea that Akatosh, the chief of the human gods, was the same god as Auriel, the chief of the elven gods. Like, they really didn't like elves at all, and after trying for a long time to disprove that the two were the same, the secret masters of the Mudokati Selective channeled the Orbrus itself to mythically remove those aspects of the dragon god they disapproved of. They literally tried to rip the elven parts of Akatosh out of him and make him more pro-humans using this super powerful magical artifact called the Staff of Towers. It was this event that caused a huge dragon break known as the Middle Dawn, and it literally drove Akka crazy. Some estimates say that it lasted for about 1,008 years in the First Era, but given that the time god had lost control of time, there's no way to say for sure. Now, nobody knows really what happened during this time, and whether or not the Mudokati Selectives succeeded is a whole other question, but either way, they broke the dragon. Then in the year 417 of the Third Era, another dragon break occurred, though far less damaging than the Middle Dawn. This was when the Numidium, a huge golem of incredible power, was activated, and it was supposedly claimed by 4 different factions at once and used to conquer an entire region. And the Numidium you can actually find in Morrowind if you get to the end of the main quest. And another break supposedly occurred when Tiber Septim began conquering Tamriel with it, supposedly. What causes a dragon break at any particular moment isn't entirely clear, but it seems to be associated with massive historical events that changed the course of Tamrielic history. Now, these are just the known dragon breaks. It's quite likely that there were more than that simply aren't recorded, or didn't affect enough of Tamriel to ever be noted down in the history books. Many people believe that the time god broke back during the creation of Mundus, with how stressful it was for him. But the question we're concerned with today, of course, is what these dragon breaks have to do with the Dove we meet in Skyrim. Now, the simplest way I feel to describe it is like a shattered window. As we talked about before, there was one original time god, Akka. Think of him like a solid window pane. Then with each dragon break to occur throughout history, the window pane shatters a little bit. The bigger the break, like the warp in the west or the Middle Dawn, the more cracks there are. From this, the larger shards of glass in this cracked window make beings like Akatosh and Alduin, while the smaller shards represent the dragons that we fight and kill in Skyrim. The larger the shard, the more powerful the dragon soul, representing a larger part of that one original time god Akka. The dragons of Skyrim are literally fragments of time itself. This theory is largely based on a few lines in an out-of-game text called Etada, Eat the Dreamer. His mind broke when his perch from eternity allowed the day, and we of all the Orbrus live on in its fragments. It all becomes a lobotomized reptilian, the water from which we dragged ourselves out of to say, mirror-like, autochthonic, automatic, we are too, on his countless knees, dementia given dimension, dementia. I completely understand that this one is one of those what the hell moments. The first line talks about the time god breaking during creation, and some people believe that the second line is describing the experience of being broken into the different shards of the time god. To rephrase it, Akka was the original time god, who may have shattered into pieces time after time with each dragon break to become Alkosh, Akatosh, Alduin, Akatosh, as well as the Dova we fight in Skyrim. This is just a theory though, and we must take it with a grain of salt, even though it does explain a lot of what we understand from dragons. When Alduin describes himself as the firstborn of Akatosh, he may simply be referring to the first or largest shard to break off from Akatosh. Likewise, the Dove being children of Akatosh would be simply that they are smaller and later fragments of him. Though now we get to the wobbly timey-wimey part of it, but stick with me, I'll try and explain it to the best of my knowledge. We do know that according to Dremora that the College of Whispers have questioned, dragons just were and are eternal, immortal, unchanging, and unyielding. They are not born or hatched, they do not mate or breed. But if dragons have been there since the start, then how did they come about after each dragon break, which only happened at various points throughout history? So as far as we know, when a dragon break happens, it affects not just the present, but the past and the future as well. So imagine if a dragon break caused you to lose an arm. It doesn't just take away your arm from now on, it makes it so that you never had an arm in the first place. The same applies to these shards of Akka. Every time that the dragon broke, it may have made it so that those shards of the time dragon had always been there. That Alduin, Akatosh, or Akatosh had always existed. Got it? Kinda? A little bit? I'll take that. This relationship with Akatosh that dragons have explains a lot about why they are the way they are, why dragon renders so lethal to them. It forces them to comprehend not just mortality, but finite time when they are creatures of the eternal present, of Akatosh. To touch on the complexity of everything involved in this theory, there are a couple of other factors involved in all of this, including the idea that mortals believing gods are a certain way actually makes them that way. Imagine if you believed your friend was gay, but they weren't. But then you told people that they were gay anyway and everyone started believing it. Bam, your friend actually turns gay. So what are dragons? It's possible, because this is just a theory, that they are shards of the original time god Akka, but more directly related to Akatosh, brought about by the dragon breaks throughout history, where the time god literally goes crazy and loses control of time. But that's all from me. My question of the day, if you could time travel, where would you go? Or should I say, when? But either way, if you like what I do and my content, then thank you, and you can always support me over on Patreon for as little as a couple of dollars a month. That really helps me and helps my channel grow. Otherwise, I would love to hear your own thoughts down in the comments below, and please come say hello to me over on Twitter or Facebook. I love interacting with you guys, with the community, and if you are so inclined, feel free to email me at the address or links in the description below. Stay nerdy, Subfuries, and I will see you in the future.